Terri, who is started as the leader of the Hadran women of Minneapolis, has recently made Aliyah, which we're also excited about, those of us living here, and we get to see you on the daily Zoom, which is great. And Terri is a real leader, and we're very excited to hear her Daf Yomi journey. And no.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, Kaya, thank you for your interesting perspective. That was really amazing. And it just never know where these things come up and where you can hear about them. So I really want to, I appreciate that. And Rabbanit Michelle, I want to thank you so much for asking me to speak today. And I want to dedicate my talk today to my parents, Nachum Meir ben David Ber Malka and Cheni Mindel bat Yerachmiel Kohen and Shima Fega, from where this all began. I was born and grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, one of those flyover states that the New Yorker made fun of in its iconic View of the World cartoon. Even so, I was 5 years old before I realized that not everyone was Jewish. My parents raised my sister and me to put Judaism at the center of our lives from the day we were born. I remember when a kindergarten classmate invited me to have lunch at her home. I really do remember this. In the middle of lunch, a light bulb went off in my head that prompted me to ask my friend's mother, "Are we having milchik or fleishik for lunch?" Yes, I grew up in a kosher home in a city without a kosher butcher. My friend's mother heard these foreign words, called my mother, and said, "Your daughter's speaking in tongues. Come pick her up and take her home." So that night was the first time my parents had a talk with me, and they explained that the whole world wasn't Jewish, that not everyone kept kosher, and how to handle the next time I was at a play date where I was offered lunch. Putting Judaism at the center of our lives also meant love of Israel was a core value. As I progressed through high school, junior high and high school, I became interested in learning more about Judaism and its ancient texts. For college, I chose what was then the joint program between the Jewish Theological Seminary and Columbia, the School of General Studies at Columbia. And I was lucky enough to meet my husband in the first semester of college. I had never really met anyone like him who had a love of Judaism like my own. Chaim had no idea where Nebraska was, but he learned soon enough. We spent our junior year studying at Hebrew University in Israel, where we took most of our classes in Hebrew. And that year was the jumpstart to our shared fluency in Hebrew and helped us create shared memories of living here. The first time I learned Talmud was second semester of freshman year in college. My teacher was Dr. Judith Hauptman. I had no idea that Dr. Hauptman was traversing a new road for women to study Talmud. I thought she seemed smart and was a great pedagogue, and the topic was interesting. So I decided to major in Talmud, and at the time I was one of the few women Talmud majors at Liss College. I then attended the Cardozo School of Law, graduated, and began what turned out to be a 41-year career as a corporate and mergers and acquisitions lawyer. At my first firm, Paul Weiss in New York, we had a group who studied Mishnah once a week, led by another then associate, David Zweibel, who left Paul Weiss to become general counsel to Agudath Israel and then its CEO. During law school, I remember the first time I was in a civil procedure class when the professor began to discuss the importance of interpreting facts within the specific context, and I was struck by how familiar my Talmud training was and what good prep it was for my legal studies. My knowledge of Hebrew and Talmudic law helped me a few times in my career. And one of the funniest stories was when I had a client who bought a cookie company. So the sellers had kosher certification from the OU, and the buyers, my clients, were Jewish, though not observant. And the transaction closed in the first quarter of whatever year it was, but not long before Passover. So when the OU rabbi came to inspect right after the sale had been done, he explained to the clients, now that he realized they were Jewish, they'd have to close the company, the manufacturing facility, and also the corporate office. And he left, and my clients called me and he said, "We have to do what?" They were just stunned. So I said, "Have the OU rabbi call me, who's in charge of your company, and we'll see what we can do." So he called me and talked for quite a while about what he believed was the predicament. This was a phone call. When he finally stopped talking, I asked him if he was concerned about Chametz Shavar Lava Pesach. Well, it's too bad it wasn't a Zoom call, because the phone went dead for at least a minute. And a woman attorney from a Minneapolis, and I can imagine him thinking, "Oh, there's this woman attorney from a Minneapolis law firm challenging his opinion with a halachic citation." Finally, he recovered his composure and said, "Oh, so you know what I'm talking about?" I said I did. And we then discussed if they could close the factory and not the corporate office. And the rabbi stammered a bit and said he talked to the big boss. about whether the corporate office could stay open. To this day, I don't know whether the big boss was God or it was his actual boss. But I never stopped loving the Talmud. Life got in the way. Roll forward to 2018, the middle of Avodah Zarah in the 13th cycle. I borrowed the book If All the Seas Were Ink, written by Alana Kirshan, from my son Avi and daughter-in-law Shayna while visiting them one winter weekend in East Lakeview, Chicago. I read the entire book before we left Chicago and decided then that I would figure out how to integrate Daf Yomi into my life ASAP. At the Midway airport, as we were waiting to return to Minneapolis, I began to tool around on the internet trying to find a podcast to listen to in order to begin Daf Yomi. Well, I found a lot of podcasts taught by men from yeshivas with pronunciations I couldn't understand. And then I stumbled upon a Hadran. I couldn't believe it. The daily daf taught by a woman with pronunciations I could understand. Finding the Hadran podcast was not an accident. That was my own hashgachat prati. And so my Daf Yomi journey began. And when my husband and I came to Israel the summer of 2018, I asked enough times that Rabbanit Michelle agreed that I could come to her house for one of the sessions that were just being recorded at the time. And I just had to have a mental image when I went back to Minneapolis of what this was going to look like. And then as the days grew closer to the Siyum for the 13th cycle in 2020, I decided I needed to attend. I thought the first woman Siyum was going to be history making, and I wanted to be witness. And I have been, because of my career, to many events celebrating the leadership of women, but I've never been to an event that celebrated the intellectual prowess of women. And it was amazing. I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it. 3,000 women attended and a few men. And at the end of the Siyum, those finishing HaShas were asked to stand up to say the Hadrons. I fully expected at least half of those people in attendance would stand up. There were two hands full. I was so astonished and proud of the number of women and a few men who came to fet the women who had completed HaShas. That was probably one of the most inspiring evenings of my whole life. Little did any of us know at the time that the world as we knew it was about to shut down. And one of the constants in my life, and I think for many of you, have been Daf Yomi, and it continued to be an anchor in my life. One of my former law partners, when I told him what I was doing, said he couldn't imagine doing anything every day other than brushing his teeth. Since I began learning Daf Yomi, we've been through the pandemic. All four of my husband and my parents passed away. Two of our three grandchildren were born. October 7th happened and the war began. Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. The Iranian war happened and we made Aliyah. I began to think during those days of the pandemic what Daf Yomi meant to me and made what I thought was a neder, which I have realized after further study was actually a shavua, that if a sick member of my family recovered, I would do a page of Gemara every day for the rest of my life. Someone asked me last week if I was going to stop, so no, I'm not going to stop. I began to participate in real time when I was in Israel during the 14th cycle with the morning 7:15 class with Rabbanit Michelle. And our Zoom group has become a true community, celebrating our simchas and holding each other up in difficult times. The strength and resilience of this group, many of whom have never met each other face to face, is truly remarkable. When we made Aliyah in July 2024, I was happy to participate every weekday live with Rabbanit Michelle's Zoom session, and then I began to study Talmud more in depth at Pardes with Rav Daniel Reifman and at Nitzanim with Rav Shai Finkelstein. These classes have augmented my Daf Yomi learning, and they're helping me to increase my skills and go deeper into the Talmud. From my father, I learned that anytime a client came to my office, my job was to determine the questions they didn't ask. Because he said, once the questions are clear, the answers are apparent. One of the things I love the most about my Talmud study is the debate among the rabbis over the questions. I began to yearn to understand on each page of Talmud I studied the relationship of the rabbis who were talking. I was a history major at Columbia, and I just wanted to understand more of what was going on. So I tried to find a study guide, and when I couldn't, I began creating my own, a set of 4x6 cards, color-coded so a learner can identify when the rabbi lived and have a better sense of how the conversations presented on the page happened. My husband, who proudly watched me and supported me learn the daf until now, decided, like me, to begin doing daf yomi in the middle of Avodah Zarah this year. We look forward to finishing HaShas together the next time. When my dad, a lifelong learner himself, celebrated his second bar mitzvah, My sister wrote a list of the top 10 things we learned from him. I want to close with that list. And the love of Judaism and the strong ideals of both my parents have continued to provide encouragement for me in everything I do. One, find your passion and then do what you love. Two, strength comes from within. Three, self-confidence is a choice. Four, challenges are not obstacles to overcome, but rather opportunities from which to learn. Five, yesterday is done, tomorrow is uncertain. Make today count. Six, never stop learning. Growing means living. Seven, give not just of your time or of your money, but also give of your heart. Eight, kindness matters and words are powerful. Nine, girls can too. Never feel limited. And last but not least, 10, martinis are best with gin and olives. Thank you. And I can't wait to continue to study with all of you starting tomorrow morning.
Wow. Thank you, Terry. That was really, really
My pleasure.
exceptionally beautiful and
Thank you for
very
asking me to speak.
inspiring.
It was nice to put it together. And it was just, I love you all.
The feelings are mutual.